Mic's on. All right. Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Curriculum and Evaluation Committee to order. It is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. We are in the Nashua North boardroom. And with us tonight, I guess first I'll do the roll. Miss Giglio, I know, said she had a prior commitment. She will not be here tonight. Ms. Prin?
Here.
Ms. Daniels-Williams?
Here.
Is here as alternate. And we also have the chair of the policy committee, Ms. Raymond,
Here.
who is here advising us. You allowed to vote tonight?
No, I don't vote.
We're not voting anyway.
Just here to learn.
And safely return to us from Greece, from abroad. Dr. Andre is here. We also have two elementary principals with us who've been working on a new elementary reporting mechanism, Ms. T-Boom and Ms. Cerrone. Thank you for being here. So, Dr. Andre, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Claffey. So the first order of business tonight is really to highlight the work that our elementary teachers and administrators, a subgroup, has been working on for, quite honestly, a number of years and more within the last year, with a little more urgency on how do we increase communication with families about student achievement in a more efficient way, and also reduce some of the burden on some of the reporting placed on the elementary teachers. So what we've been really concentrating on, again, is that communication with families. There's a number of mechanisms and reports that go home that seem a little more fragmented, or we have progress reports, open house, report cards, all like in a short window. So it seems like it's all crunched. It's whether it could be overload for families or from an educator point of view, it's a lot in a short period. And so again, I'm going to turn it over to our two elementary principals to talk about the work of the committee and again, the intent. So it's going to be different. So again, we're not looking for really recommendations or motions tonight, but what we want to roll out this year is a different reporting style, but it's going to be different for some parents because it's, again, when we get into is, whether we're doing progress reports or different reports coming home at different times. Again, it might be less is more. Kind of get below some of the punchline at the beginning, but even to the question on what's the value of report cards, especially in trimester 1. So, I mean, Mr. Claffey and Ms. Print is, report cards used to be something so significant, but we give out so many progress reports or parents have access to so much more data in a more timely fashion that if you're finding out your child is failing only through a report card, we're doing something wrong. So we're having a lot more conversations on how do we increase our communication through different reporting styles. So really hard kind of conversations, but I think it's taken us into 2024. So that being said, I'm going to turn over the floor to Ms. Cerrone and Ms. T-Boom on some of the work and the overview.
Hey everyone, thank you for having us here. My name's Tanya T-Boom. I work at Birch Hill.
I am Amanda Cerrone, and I am the principal at Maine Dunstable Elementary School.
We were on a team that worked all year and met multiple times to come up with this schedule. And I just wanted to kind of share their names with you just so you know. And Amanda wrote the names down.
So we had a representative from Bicentennial, a teacher, Sherry Clark, who worked on this, as well as Deb Brittenriker from Mount Pleasant, our reading specialist, Kelly Mariano, a New Searles teacher, as well as a teacher, Maureen Pat from Broad Street, and Patty Gagnon from Sunset Heights. We also did have our new teachers union president come to a few of our meetings as well to be included in these conversations.
So what started as kind of talking about communication led us to looking at basically what we were already doing in our schools and making sure that we are all doing many of the same things at the same time, communicating in the same way, because there are 12 elementary schools and things have changed over the last few years, as you all know. So in the folder that I gave you, there is a reporting schedule. It's set up by the month, and I figured I'd just start off by kind of going over what that is. There's some acronyms, and we were supposed to put a list of what the words are, so I'll read them out to you. But the first thing that we wanted to just let you know is in September, every school does, a parent meet or a meet and greet, open house, where they also sign up for conferences that happen in November. The November conferences are set up by central office for that time on 2 different days. We also, in September, due to some of the new federal laws that were put into place by the Department of Ed, we do testing. So I know that some of you have heard of our testing for dyslexia and finding out where kids are based on their foundational reading literacy skills. So basically what happens is we use an assessment in Nashua called M-Class, Dibbles 8, Dibbles 8. Yeah. And students are required in K through 3 to give this assessment. And many schools were all doing it K through 5. And the recommendation that we were going to have is that that is done K through 5 moving forward. And this intervention collects the data of where kids are in different skills based on, their development and their level. Do you want to add to that a little?
I would just say each of the assessments, they're now done on the computer, which previously Dibbles was done years ago, paper pencil. A lot of people were, hesitant, but last year they did a really nice job. All educators really got on board and they saw the value in the data. It was right there for them. So I think this is just another tool for our teachers and our interventionists, our reading specialists, as well as our administrators. We can use this data to inform our teachers, or our parents, as well as help guide our instruction.
Can you just highlight from the results of the Dibbles that the reading intervention plan, which is the RIP on here? So it's not.
Yeah. So the RIP, we call it the RIP, which is Reading Intervention Planning. It sounds, it's not. It's a very good document. And this actually comes from the Department of Ed. Nashua adopted pretty much the same document. And basically what happens with that, it becomes a very much team approach with a targeted skills. So based on the data, which we'll start with the first screener, which is the Dibbles. And if you noticed in October, we go into secondary screeners if kids fall into a category where there's concerns. We use common, there's certain scores that will put the kids into areas where they would need some intervention. So it will dive a little deeper. And in here, in this packet, and I won't get into it, but I wanted to give you some examples, Amanda and I, of what that screener would look like if you ever do want to kind of read into it. But the first guide for the reading assessments is just kind of like, it can be a little confusing for teachers at first, which is why last year was kind of difficult for the teachers because it was given to us from the state pretty late or beginning of the school year. And we kind of pulled it together as a district to be able to implement that with fidelity. And I think it was done well, but I think the part that was difficult was trying to test all the kids and who was going to do it and how that was going to happen. I believe that the staff at all the schools now have a routine based on doing it 3 times last year. But the initial screener can be done, by the teacher, can be done by a team, a reading teacher, could be done, Amanda could do one at her school if she felt like she was helping. The data would be there either way. And then based on that, if they score below a certain number, then we would head into a secondary screener, which would focus even more on what those literacy target skills would be that we would need to support the students to be successful.
And from those scores, it's written on here in red and yellow, those are the students that we would be giving the secondary assessments to. There's multiple categories in the assessment, but they're different at some grade levels because they assume that students have tested out. So you might see something different on a kindergarten than you would on a fourth grade assessment.
Can I throw a question at you, just for a clarification? So once the screening is done, as a parent or a guardian, will I receive any information, like a sample letter, as a result of these screeners?
Yep. Absolutely. If you move into November, so what would happen is in October, when we gave those assessments, even though we haven't met with parents or maybe not communicated quite yet, we would already start interventions. Does that make sense in the classroom? So the interventions in the classroom would be whether the teacher is doing some interventions to support targeted skills, or a reading specialist, or it could really be anyone there, special educator, ELL teacher, whoever that team is that's going to be part of that. And that team is listed in the reading intervention plan, the RIP. And those targeted skills are laid out exactly where those areas of need are for each student. So each student is different from the next based on their need. But we can get to that, but I know you had a question.
Yeah, I was just curious, because I'm familiar with DIBELS. Are you using for your secondary assessments, are you progress monitoring with DIBELS, or are you using a different assessment? And you may answer that question later anyway, but I figured I'd ask now.
Yeah.
So we, the progress monitoring happens with the DIBELS assessment. We may use Heggerty or the PAST, or even letters, the phonics and word reading surveys. We could use those if we needed to dig deeper. If a child scored, let's say in yellow, which is like that cusp area, if we wanted to dig deeper and really see where that breakdown was for that child. We just want to make sure that the intervention that we're providing is targeted on the exact skill that they're lacking. We don't want to say, vowel sounds if it's something specific that we could get to.
Okay, no, thank you.
Of course.
Mr. Claffey, can I ask a question?
Sure, of course, Ms. Raymond.
Thank you. Sorry, so when you're talking about some of these targeted interventions based on the scores, are these things that require like a parental approval, or is this more like differentiated instruction as part of good teaching practice?
I do want to share. So one of the quick letters that we will send home, just to let the communication continue, right after we do some of this assessments, before we have our conferences, which will be in November, where we'll kind of dive deeper with the parents, there'll be a letter that does go home to inform them that there are interventions being had with the student. But in my understanding, interventions, unless it's through special ed, are done because they need it. You do what we need to for students. So I don't believe there's a permission piece to it, unless you disagree.
So it's part of when we're developing the reading intervention plans, the RIPS. So that's going to be communicated with the parents on what we're working on, the specific skills. So there will be parental communication, and whether it's an approval but that's how we're identifying a problem. Here's our solution, here's our intervention. And from there, the progress monitoring will begin. Again, that should be communicated with the parents or guardians on a 2-week or a 4-week basis as well. So it's just a little more live data that's going out. Again, that parents should know, and students, right? Whether it's a second grader or a fourth grader, like this is the skill I'm working on and this is how I'm doing. So it's, again, much more transparent of making those plans come to life.
Right, I like that. I like the idea of the student and the parent, being able to have an awareness of what their goal is and then celebrating when they reach that goal. But I guess my curiosity is about, in the past we've had parents who, for example, didn't want to do an IEP because they were worried about labels. And so is this a situation where parents might be worried about like a labeling of kids, or is this like, more just being more responsive to differentiated instruction
So
that
this
kids
is
need?
tier 1, tier 2 interventions. This is not tier 3, which is getting into the special education. So that's prior to that. So, but there might be flags that come out from the screening that we might be using data that might lead us to a special education referral, which is a different conversation.
Thank you.
So back in October, we'll continue with the progress monitoring. It was recommended by Amplified, which is the program that the Nashua School District has adopted to use this program. And they've recommended 2 weeks for any students that are in the red, which fall, I believe, 2 grades below. I think that's what most of the grades are. And then every 4 weeks for students that are in the yellow. And that's a much smaller screener. It's not as lengthy, even though both of them are not very lengthy, which is good. In October, we'll also begin what's called each school will collect their data and meet with their teams to look at that data and sit down and review any changes and interventions based on the beginning of the year assessment. We'll also be doing interventions already based on the end of year assessment from this past year. So based on the end of year assessment that we did in May, June, interventions will begin in September, right when we get back to school. But after the assessments are done for the beginning of the year, some of those interventions for kids may change, or their targeted skills may change, or like you said, Heather, we'll be able to celebrate that they've, gained those skills and are moving on. Do you want to share anything on that?
I would just say, I know the part about progress monitoring. That was something that last year we knew a little bit about. Some schools, that was new, right? The whole process was new. That's something that a lot of schools are really going to focus on this year. So having that part of our plan was important. It also provides data like we've been discussing, so parents know where their students are in real time. And that piece of, we did do a lot of research. We reached out to the state to make sure we were reporting out enough. And they said, I think the term was often. So we really liked Amplify. It gave us clear-cut guidelines. So that's what we felt was important, as long as we had that clear-cut guideline. That way we're all on the same page, because as we said before, we're 12 elementary schools. We need to be a little bit more cohesive with that.
So then we move into, do you guys have any questions on that so far? Okay. Moving into November. So November's a big month for a lot of things. One of the big ones is we have our conferences. In elementary school, we have them set up on 2 different days, on 2 different weeks. I think one's on Wednesday, one's on Thursday. That's to help support with some of our ELL students and
Translations.
translations. So during, our goal was to find a way to communicate with parents without meeting, writing it down, doing all of it in 1 month, which was happening. And it seemed to be almost like what you were saying, Dr. Andre, with almost over-reporting. And it seemed like that was the same things being said 3 times in a row between November and the beginning of December. So the goal would be that obviously we would all want to meet with our parents as educators. So the conference would be the most valuable piece. However, we understand that that doesn't happen with all our parents. So if that doesn't, at that point, in all 3 areas, if we do have the conference, you would share your reading intervention plan if there was one with your student, with your parents. You would share what's called a home connect. So part of the DIBELS assessment is a home connect paper that that can be sent home with the families, that kind of puts it into, an easier way to read through what their child needs for support, and then what they can do to support them at home, some strategies or skills that will help them, practice whatever that is. And then lastly, any progress monitoring that we've done from the time that we've started working with that child in interventions. If that doesn't work, we would move on to a phone call. That was our next step. If for some reason a parent couldn't meet for the conference face-to-face, we would try to work on a phone call and share those same 3 items, and then obviously send them home. And then lastly, if the phone call wasn't working, our goal was to do some sort of a progress report, which would be just a written piece explaining where their child is, what they're doing for any interventions if they need any, and then including copies of the reading intervention plan, the Home Connect, and any progress monitoring. You
And
want to
then
share anything?
I would just say, if you look underneath that, there's a link. It would be a link. We don't have color copying at either of our schools right now. Under construction, we'll get there. But there's a how-to hyperlink for journaling, and that's really to keep track of, I met with Johnny's parents on such and such date for an in-person conference. Very, not super specific, but enough to know that we're making sure that we have that documentation. If it's something like maybe it wasn't a conference and it was a phone call, that would be noted there, as well as if it was a progress report was sent home, just to really make sure that we're following, because that will follow the child, right? So that we'll know over the years, okay, yep, this is where this child has been, this is what the parents have been doing.
I have a quick question.
President
Jens,
Bishop.
is there opportunities for maybe Zoom connects for families that struggle with transportation getting to and from the school?
I think a lot of our schools offer, if a parent would
Yeah.
rather Zoom in, that's always.
We're just so specific about it that I wanted to make sure that it wasn't something that we
Yes.
outvoted.
It's not outvoted.
Because I personally like it, because it's often hard for me to get from work and to
Absolutely.
here every single day of the week.
Yeah, as long as there's that communication,
Yeah.
that's really what we're looking for. They deserve to know how their students are doing.
Oh, yeah.
And again, just to highlight the journaling. So we want to make sure there's still accountability. So, we don't get to a point of the year where a student is not making adequate progress and a parent's like saying, I was never informed. Or, some teachers are having the meetings and other teachers are not having meetings. So we want, from an administrative point of view, to ensure that there is ongoing active communication. So again, that journaling is just a documentation of whether it was a conference was held, phone calls were being held, whether it's a Zoom meeting or a narrative was sent out. So again, in lieu of if progress reports aren't necessary, or we start talking about eliminating some aspect of report cards, that we do have documentation, especially if someone's saying, I'm not hearing from my teacher.
Journaling is on the X2 that we use through the district too. So that's why it follows the child versus if we just did like a Google document in our school. We felt that would follow them wherever school they ended up.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. Yes, I think that's great to do it in X2 so that it's, because we do have families that move from one school to another for a lot of different reasons. So my question is just kind of more big picture to make sure that I'm following. So this kind of started, the first thing you talked about was the DIBELS, which is a dyslexia screening tool. But by the time we're in November, you're not just reporting on dyslexia and that tool. This is an all-encompassing, right, reporting, and kind of similar to what we've done on all aspects of the child's academic and behavioral progress, right?
That's correct, in November.
I just want to make sure I was picking up that it's not only dyslexia that we are having this increased communication.
So great segue where Ms. Teboom will kind of, in your packet in the blue folder, you'll also see a sample letter that would go to parents and guardians on just the overview. We just have we have so much data at our fingertips now. So how are we communicating that? How are we sharing that with families on a more timely basis? So, Ms. Teboom?
So when you read through the letter, it kind of went through 5 pieces that we would continue to communicate to parents. One would obviously be the conferences. Obviously, I do write face-to-face, but maybe I'll throw in the Zoom there for you too, so we make sure. We also included in this document at the end, making sure that we're sharing all the assessments that the students are taking. So it's not just the DIBELS data, but also CKLA assessments, Eureka Squared, which is our math program assessments, Foundation assessments, which is our phonics piece, science, obviously. So any piece of assessments that they're doing that they are getting sent home, and that parents are able to review those and see where how their child is doing. Moving on to just the literacy, those are the literacy achievement reports. That's what we were just talking about. Just because we have established, Nashua's adopted the M-Class DIBELS. Obviously, it's state directed, but we have Eureka Squared, but it's not really set up in the same avenue as the M-Classes, where it's we can report out the same way. So it's based on the assessments on the units that the students are taught. And then lastly, obviously, any behavior concerns or struggles, it would be reported out throughout the year, obviously, but at those times. So this letter was a draft of what we were thinking of sending out to let parents know that the communication would be ongoing, not just at, like Dr. Andre said, at progress reports or report cards. And then we kind of just keep going through the rest of the year that we would continue. So DIBELS is done 3 times a year. It's done again in January. And again, we'll have that data meeting to review and restructure the intervention teams if needed, and re-update or add to, or hopefully celebrate that they don't need a reading intervention plan. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think the other piece, just to discuss a little bit, is the fact that it does say on here that our PLCs, so our professional learning communities, are what those are. And those happen. A lot of our schools are doing them multiple times. It's not just those times. So I want you to be just cognizant of that. We're always talking about students. We're always talking about their progress. But these specific ones are very dedicated and focused on that. Grade level team meetings happen all the time, but these are those meetings that everyone's around the table to make sure it's not just the classroom teachers, it's classroom teachers, interventionists, anyone working with the children. It's a really all hands on deck approach.
We went into continuing with, in place of that progress report, is sending home again any behavior concerns, any literacy, going back to the letter, any of those pieces there that need to go home. In February, report cards would go through for trimester 2. End of the year, DIBELS would happen about May. In June, we would continue again with those data meetings, update any of the reading intervention plans, and then continue that with the report cards, with reporting out in the last report card for trimester 3. A big piece to this too is to making sure that we're all doing the same type of gathering of records. So included in the student records would be the reading intervention plan, the progress monitoring. It has a thing you can print out with the graphs, which is what we would be giving to parents anyways, would be part of their student record. And then a student summary report that is also included through M-Class. And that's kind of where we ended.
Questions? Ms. Daniels-Williams.
I guess I have a couple questions. So it says that you have like 30 to 60 days from the beginning of school to do the reports, but they won't get the information on the reports till November, or will they get them automatically?
No, that's a great question. So the state, you need to give the first screening within 60 days of the first day they start school. So if they start the first day, or they start a couple weeks in, or whenever they start in Nashua. So you have 60 days. And then after 60 days, you have 30 days to do the secondary assessments if needed. So 60 days by the time we start school brings you to the beginning of November, and our conferences start the second week in November. So it's actually pretty close to the end of that 60 days, if that makes sense. Instead of moving the conferences up, we looked at more of keeping them at the same times, and it gives us time to write the reading intervention plans as a team. So like you were saying, it's a team approach, not one person's writing the plan. It's not just the teacher, it's the ELL teacher's part of it, the special educator, the reading teacher, anyone. Us, we're a part of the team, so.
I guess just as a parent in this, that first 60 days, we have no clue that any of this is going on. There's no letter that has gone out. There's no anything that has. And how about in the first 60 days, we don't have access to X2, or Aspen, where's the, and second part of that is, how about if, is an ESL student or an ELL learner? You know what I'm saying? Where is the care in there for that, other than letters going out, and if no one answers, then we'll send them a letter?
Bishop Hannah.
I actually learned some information today from the United Way. They have a digital equity program going on to make sure that all households have smartphones or laptops or iPads. I'm wondering if we're going to be so heavily dependent on technology in Aspen and X2, if we want to pair with the United Way to make sure that all of our families have access to the technology, and we could probably hand them out at open houses, and we could have like IT come help them sign up for their account, translators available, so that right from the onset, they have access to the tools that they need so that we're this is a great communication plan. But
So one
I literally just learned this 4 hours ago, and I'm so excited.
So one aspect, again, I think, we talked a lot about the dyslexia law, but also in this intent, or in the communication plan, there's ongoing assessment. So if you're having a math assessment or a science assessment, it's incumbent upon the classroom teacher to be sending home those assessments. So you are getting information even before the reading intervention plan. So Unit 1 in math, it's our expectations that teachers are sending that home to parents on what's the progress. So on the second page, I think it's the second page, you'll see ongoing assessments that should be sent home throughout the year. Math unit assessments, foundations assessments, CKLA word study, CKLA unit assessments, and then ongoing communication. So that should be happening in addition to the reading intervention plans. So we're not waiting to November. We're expecting classroom teachers, as they're getting the assessment data on an ongoing basis, to be sending that home and giving that information to parents. So that that's going home prior.
Requiring.
What's that?
Expecting or requiring, because
So that's our expectation. So again, we met with all the elementary principals, we met with the teachers, we met with the NCU president. Again, it's that ongoing, that the journaling to say, this is what I've been doing, and this is my communication with parents. We want to be increasing the communication to parents. So again, the building principals,
and that's what we're saying, but we skipped right over what Jen had said about how to get this information to the parent.
so it could be in backpack, like where parents are,
But
teachers
what
are,
is that?
so teachers are already sending home, like whether it's paper information, it doesn't have to only be through X2. There's a lot of communication already through classroom teachers, but we want to make sure that math unit assessments, again, sent home and being communicated on that progress. Foundations assessments or that information, so.
I had a question about how state assessment scores are shared with parents and how much they're used in determining a student's needs.
Yep.
In their backpack.
So two parts, just so we're, when we mentioned X2, I just want to clear this up. That was actually more of an internal piece for us to keep track of it in our own way, not necessarily for you to track it for your child as a parent. You have access to X2. The journaling would just be so that we were able to kind of go back as people that work with your child to know that if they've met with, or for the principal to kind of hold their staff accountable for following through on those expectations. Otherwise, everything will go home by paper. It won't be through X2, except for maybe I know you can access your report card in the X2, but I know that's even controversial because some schools are doing it, some schools didn't, because they felt like families might not be able to access as well as others.
And that's what I'm trying to get to today, making it a universal way that every parent knows how they're going to get the information, and making it available in two different mediums so that they can be able to refer back to it. Because, I mean, I'm on raising my fourth child, and lots of paper didn't make it home. So much paper. Whole tree.
Or it's all like crumpled and wet at the bottom of the backpack because someone's lunch melted all over it. Yes, I'm familiar with
Well, is that to be determined?
No.
I'm asking them. Is that something you're going to nail down?
So we're not, at the secondary level is more about, there's a grade reporting. But it's not set up at the elementary, quite honestly. So it'd still be the traditional information still going home in the backpack, letters or in folders, and it's more paper-based. There's a lot more formative assessments at the elementary than at the secondary, quite honestly. So there's your math assessments, or your DIBELS information, or your M-class information. There's just a lot more data at the elementary that's much more timely and lively, but that's still going to be from the classroom teacher. It won't be through X2. It's still more paper-based. Again, we haven't nailed down or directed certain documents because, again, educators are communicating. I want the educators to drive a lot of the conversations as well. They know the data that needs to be communicated, their progress, their cadence with their families. So again, where we're putting in those higher level math assessments, but there are some teachers that I know that are emailing families on a daily basis. Right, they have great communication, or they're conferencing. So, but I'm not going to make that a requirement for everybody. It's just really, again, what's that high level data that needs to go home, and really use our educators' professional judgment on how frequently they need to be communicating. Hate to say it on the other end is, there's some teachers who don't want to communicate, but we need to hold them accountable as well. So,
Are you committed to a term 2 and term 3 report card?
yes.
So can we get an assurance that report card will be available, or will be sent home and available online? Or is that already been said?
That's currently.
I'm just trying to address the concerns that were voiced.
Yeah, so I just want, term 2 and term 3 are still, there's no change, trimester 2 and trimester 3, there's no changes to our report card in that kind of cadence. So whether it's being mailed home or it's available in the parent portal, that's not going to change. The conversation is really around, do we have a trimester 1 report card? But even if we have it or not, it's really what this reporting committee wants to get to. It's how do we increase the communication? What's getting sent home, and what's the cadence behind it, especially in September and October, and getting to that point. But again, conferences, progress report, and report cards currently are all in the same couple weeks, and that's just overkill for educators. So, but what we're trying to do is increase that information.
I guess my concern with that would be is if they had missed all the paper coming home, they won't have anything in electronic form till December, which is halfway. That's when the term 1 report card comes out. So and then term 2 is March. I mean, that seems like, I understand that maybe we don't want to do one at the beginning of the school year, but why is there not going to be any information on your child till December?
They should have had a
That's-
conference at that point.
But how about if they don't come for the conference
So
or
they said
whatever?
they're gonna do a follow-up phone call.
Yeah, so we want to give so again, I think there's a lot of data, even prior to December. Again, in the letters that Ms. T-Boom kind of said is, here's our expectations. You should be expecting math assessment. Currently, not all math assessments go home. So we're expecting all our educators to share that information with the families on, you had a Unit 1 assessment, here's the information, here's your progress on that. You should be getting that in September instead of waiting till December, right? So we want to increase and shorten the communication gap with families and it's a little more informal, but it's more frequently, it's more timely, so that it's now October 15th and your classroom teacher is already in communication with you, say, hey, you know what, little Mario might need a little more help. So we're not waiting for report cards. We're doing a lot more sharing of information earlier in the year. And again, some of that's through the documentation. So we're not waiting for December to say, hey, by the way, did you know, your child's not making
Ms.
progress.
Prin,
This is kind of a teacher question, and I understand sending home assessments is important. So for example, say for Amplify Math, are the teachers able to do the online where they can put their test scores in online to get the data later? Because I'm just thinking from a teacher perspective, I actually hold on to tests until I've done my report cards because I need to refer to them for report cards. So either they should be able to make a copy of that, or, and I understand the need to send it home. I usually send it home after we've done the report cards. So are teachers able to access their data in another way so they can do the report cards later?
So yes, they can access it. There's an aspect, especially for our upper grades, where they do it paper pencil, but they also put the information into the computer, and so that will come through. And we'll be doing that again this year. That was still our plan, so that they have the data.
Okay, yeah, that's so helpful too.
It
Because
is.
it analyzes everything, and I wasn't sure if you guys were doing that here yet or not, so.
And along with that, it's also helpful when the test comes home in a more timely way, because then when the parents are helping with homework or when they're seeing or they're hearing that the child is struggling, it's not a big surprise come, like you were saying, December, like, wait a minute, how did I not know this? We really want to make sure that there are no surprises. There shouldn't be surprises.
Ms. Raymond?
How much extra time is it taking our educators to track this stuff in dual ways, right? Like, because you have the paper and pencil tests that they took versus the computer data entry of the test scores. Is it mostly on the computers now, like where the teachers can just access it, like with iReady, or is it still kind of broken up into both?
It's kind of a preference. Some teachers like everything in the computer, like they just want it there. I think, we really, as a district, we've been talking about data, and we really want to see where everyone is. We want to know, where are we falling down? Where are we having those gaps across the district so we can address that? But then also at our school level, we're able to get, we talk to Jonathan Foster a lot. He gets a lot of our emails just asking for the data so that we can look as administrators so we can see that. Great Minds is where they do their testing for the upper grades. So it's actually the students do it all on paper pencil, and then they answer the question on the computer. They just, the students are the ones that are putting their information in, and then when the teachers go, they can populate it and see the information. It's the younger grades where it is a little bit more work because they don't have that ability. The tests aren't on the computer, but developmentally, it's just not.
That was my question. Like, is it developmentally appropriate to be putting too much technology in the younger grades? I don't know. It makes me nervous.
And just to the point about the time and effort on educators, it's the progress report, the report cards, the conferences, all in the same time. They're like, this is redundant. And so we're sending the same information in a short window, 3 different ways, and it's not giving families any more information. So that's where a lot of the complaints kind of came into. Can we come up with a different reporting style?
So the intent of this is to make it, to increase the communication home, but also to make, to expand the amount of time that teachers have to do it so that it's not adding more responsibilities, it's just changing the timeline, kind of.
Yeah, the idea is, again, to increase communication with families, more, in a more timely fashion. Again, sharing the student progress and student achievement levels prior to the report cards or that short kind of window. So teachers are already kind of doing the work, but it's actually just making it a lot more informal instead of a formal, you have to do a progress report card all in the same kind of period. So that's where at the beginning, like, it's less is more, or just more frequent communication in a less informal way actually will be more beneficial.
So was there, when you came to us and presented this, I've been trying to get a better grasp of what the curriculum committee's role is, whether it's more approve rather than advise. So I don't know that we're in a position to make recommendations to you about your report card, but what would you like from this committee, I guess, other than?
Right, so is this something that we have to
Oh,
make
I'm
a
asking,
motion
yeah,
to
I
and
just-
approve? Or is this something that the
Why don't
district
we
just
let them
does?
answer?
Yeah, so again, I
Trying
think.
to wrap this up here and say.
So this is more the informational aspect of it. There's nothing in policy that we have to do X, Y, and Z. So this is, again, a good dialogue when we're going to roll this out. I don't want any surprises to the board saying, hey, you changed X, Y, and Z, and why is this different? I also appreciate Ms. Danielle Williams' questions, like from a parent point of view, like this is different, like this is a change. I'm not expecting this, especially if we have the conversations on possibly eliminating trimester one report cards or changing the report card. It's going to look different. And people are like, what am I hanging up on the fridge? When is that coming, right? And so that aspect of it. So we're looking for really feedback and informing the board on we're increasing family communication and engagement. It just looks different, but it's not a change in policy or that aspect of it.
Ms. Prin asked.
So this is, I see on there, it does say continued discussion on eliminating the term one report cards. We have a window of when we might make that decision.
So, quite honestly, I've been the obstacle on it. There is a huge movement on eliminating the trimester one report card because, again, it's some of it's about sufficiency, right? Like do you have enough information to actually assess all the standards that are on the trimester one? And as elementary, parents of elementary students or being an elementary teacher, how many NAs end up on the trimester?
The first trimester is mostly NAs.
Right. So what information are we actually communicating? So do we need a trimester one report card? I do have a little bias about report cards. I kind of hate them, quite honestly. I think it's, we should be having this ongoing communication. Like, I'll give you my little dream, and I've seen it in different places, but I would love students, like if we're using technology and students have their own goals and they have their reading intervention plans or their math data saying, is it on Fridays that the students are conferencing with teachers and actually creating a little video and say, hi, mom and dad, hi, grandma, this is what I learned this week and this is what I'm doing next week. Like, that's a true report card. That's student ownership. That's student agency, student empowerment. That's more powerful, and parents are like, all right, my kid knows what their progress is, their academic goals, and there's ownership there. I'd rather see us get to that informal kind of sharing information they own the data around their DIBELs, their reading intervention plans, their math data, their math goals. So I think the most important report card is the one at the end of the year that goes into the Zoom file.
Can I ask, do you expect a meeting with us later, roughly,
So
on this? because I was hoping we'd have time to discuss the other items on tonight's agenda.
Yeah, so again, I think
Unless
this is
you-
more informational, but I think if a little pushback or feedback from the subcommittee, if you kind of give us a little leeway to say, I would like to experiment eliminating trimester one report card. But if you think there's going to be any feedback or pushback, I think it's really both a communication on and letters to parents to say this is the ongoing information that you'll receive in lieu of a trimester one report card, but there will be a trimester two and trimester three. So I'm just looking for any feedback.
Now? Oh, okay.
I like the idea too. I do. I hate report cards. I hate them.
I don't hate report cards because to me, I still get $5 an A. So I get really excited to see. I was a bad student, so
We don't
if I
use
got an
these
A,
anymore.
yeah, I know MP, whatever. But I like the idea of the end of the week. Have the kid write up their own report card if they're having see their evolution of progress. I love that.
I have to say, I think when my kids were in elementary school, what was so frustrating about the first two report cards was we would look at it and be like, well, what does this mean? Because the goals are end of year goals and not, it would be much more helpful as a parent if our report card reporting time periods matched up with goals for that time period, right? So here's the term one goals, and did your child approach where they should be in December? Did they approach where we would expect a third grader to be in March? As opposed to in December, obviously they're not where they need to be in June. But it really felt like as you're going through that you really have no idea until June, and then maybe it's too late. So I like this increased reporting. I like this idea, but I think if we're going to hang on to report cards with our fingernails, that they need to be more helpful. And I don't think that our teachers want us to redesign them again, because I think they've been redesigned 6 times or 5 times in the last 10 years. So probably that's not a good thing to do again.
There was another committee redesigning the report card. Yeah.
Right? But I don't think, I found them so unhelpful the first 2.
And that's why the reporting committee is looking for that more increased informal, more timely data, as opposed to relying just on report cards.
Is this a decision that this committee and the board have to approve? Or is this, I'm just trying to read the policy, and it seems to me that if you, as a superintendent, want to experiment with not reporting, then you can. Is that your,
That's my understanding.
my
But again, I just
understanding,
want
but
full
maybe that gets us in-
transparency. So
sure.
before you get, you hear about it on Facebook or you hear about it somewhere else, we want to have the conversation and bring it to the subcommittee first so that you have an understanding and really to have this dialogue back and forth on what issues may arise.
No, it's appreciated.
I think it's a good way to start with the introduction of new things to the community is to do it in a public meeting.
Oh, absolutely. And I can see it offering more rigor to the kids. My obnoxious kids were M&Ps the first trimester, and then I think they just read for all of elementary school, Harry Potter and all that stuff. So I feel like when the teachers are giving more specific assessments and feedback, even the parents that don't have kids who are struggling in school are going to see that proficiency being even more proficient, instead of me just being just be a good student and don't be bored. So I appreciate this. I can see it being more individualized.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work.
enjoy your last week, or maybe it's over.
Dun, dun, dun.
I've seen a lot more cars in the school parking lots. That's not a good sign.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so next on the agenda is consideration of a few policies, discussion on a few policies that are relevant to the duties and powers of this committee. We, was that too formal? Is that what? Duties and powers. So I don't know, Dr. Andre, do you have a preference as to which, I know you sent us 3, but I think you did.
Yeah, so
Well, it came from.
they came from
policy.
policy
I'm
subcommittee?
sorry.
Yep.
So I guess, do you want to, is there any policy you want to talk about first?
Yeah, I think we could go in order.
Heather, is there any?
So I just, we,
Ms. Raymond, I'm sorry.
that's okay. So, so we have a policy BDE that basically talks about the committees that Nashua has. It's not on your thing here, and it says, you know, committees meet for 90 minutes. Our regular board meetings are supposed to be like 3 hours.
I saw that.
Yeah, I got that.
I'm going to be making a motion in about 20 minutes.
They don't have to go 90 minutes. That's the limit, and then you have to get approval.
That's what
to
I'm talking, I'm
continue.
talking about that extension.
So, anyways, one of the things that policy is required to do is review all the policies, even our policies about our own committees, right? Every 4 years. There's state statute, I don't remember what it is. And so as policy was doing that, we pulled IL, which is about evaluation of instructional programs. And we kind of played with it a little bit. We sent it to the full board, and then the full board sent it back to policy because this committee hasn't been meeting frequently. And it sounded at the full board meeting like the board wanted this committee to have better direction. And so then Mr. Posca and I pulled ILBA because it's related to IL, and that's about assessments. And then when we looked at policy BDEC, which is the Curriculum and Evaluation Committee policy, we saw that that one hasn't been updated in 6 years either. So we have a number of policies that are 6 to, how old is IL? IL hasn't been updated for 16 years, 6 to 16 years old, that when we talked about in the policy committee, we really felt ill-equipped to make the determination because none of us are on this committee. So we really didn't know how the committee should work, what you guys want your committee to do. We just really felt like we were not the appropriate place to vet any of these policies. So we made a motion at our last policy meeting to send them to you so that you guys could have a robust discussion about what you want your committee to look like, and how you want the committee to work with the superintendent, and how you want the superintendent to work on assessments and what we do with that data. And I have no suggestions at all. I'm sure I will if you guys get into the nitty gritty, but starting off, all I know is that it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I'm at the beginning of the knowing I don't know anything. So
In reading over these 3 policies, it seems to me a recurring theme is that the superintendent and the board are supposed to be working closely, or the superintendent and their agents or designees should be working closely. That this is my first year as chair of this committee. I think in the previous, because I only have one left. And I think previously a lot of our work was taken up just approving programs. We trying to use the federal funds that were available, the ESSER funds. And then once those programs were approved, and then we just kind of lost momentum. And then, we haven't met for quite some time. But I think when I asked the superintendent at the beginning of this conversation, how do you see these policies working? That's why I didn't
yeah, no, that's fine. So
ask the board. But I just think, what role would you? I think I heard somebody say that in your previous experience, there wasn't a curriculum committee per se, so.
So again, I think whether we start with BDEC, I think it's kind of, again, this has been reapproved in like May of 2018. But again, I think it's, what's our form and function, right? What do we want to see? How do we want to operate? And I think we kind of go from there. Again, we're I actually just met with all our administrators this morning and talk about how does our data come to life? What's our data dashboard? It should be more public. It should be on our website. Whether it's SAS data, how's that being communicated with families? How are we comparing to other districts? So we need to get more transparency with our data. I think it's important to see, again, are we reporting out on trends, obstacles, strengths of where we're going? Is it more informational here? To Mr. Claffey's point, in other districts, those types of presentations weren't made at a subcommittee level. They were made at a full board meeting because it's, for the 9 and really that conversation. So again, I think we need to kind of look at what's the role and responsibility of the CNE. In the past couple of years, I've noticed that the CNE subcommittee was approving purchasing of curriculum. Is that the role of the F&O? Is that the role of curriculum? So even though it's being approved in the curriculum subcommittee on purchasing a program and going to the full board, is that still a financial conversation as opposed to a curriculum conversation? So I think that's a little more on what's the role of the curriculum and evaluation committee. Is it reporting out? Is it really about trends that we're seeing, obstacles, and that aspect of it?
So I was on the curriculum committee back in 2018, the last time this policy was looked at. And some of the things that they did back then was they would present at the curriculum committee like the iReady data, right? And it would be really an intense, like deep dive into the iReady data. And then when that information made it to the full board, it would be more of a global. So instead of looking at each school, we would say, here's the 5th grade iReady data for the district.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that was good or bad, but that's one of the things. The other thing that the curriculum committee did was look at the professional development plans. And so as the district was making professional development plans, like for the professional development days in November and February, that would actually go to the curriculum committee. I don't know really for approval, but for informational, right? I don't remember us ever voting to be like, oh yes, that's a good plan, do it, or don't do it. But there was definitely a presentation about, this is what our test scores are showing that our staff needs support in. So now we're going to hire, this person to come and give a presentation. And then COVID happened and the whole thing fell apart. So, but I don't know if that's useful in a post-COVID world.
So, I'm sorry, please.
No, I guess I wanted to start by saying is that I don't want to be like a micromanager, but I kind of envision being on this committee is to kind of help strengthen what we're using for curriculum. I do as a person, as a parent, and as a teacher, as a member of the community, I would like to know this data. I think it's important for people to know. It kind of keeps the schools accountable.
I'm not sure that we can do that.
But
I don't
look,
think
just
I
to
can
know what the
read
data.
over New Hampshire.
Microphone.
I spent some time reading over the New Hampshire SBA guidelines, and I don't know that that's one of our functions, is to strengthen the curriculum. I think, I wonder whether that's overreaching.
Yeah,
And
maybe I misspoke. I don't want to strengthen it, but just making sure that the policies and the procedures are being followed correctly. And I'm speaking specifically to CKLA, because that was horrible, and I'm still so angry about that because it was not done well at all. And I guess it's more of making sure that everybody's being held accountable. Not necessarily, that's what I mean by that. I didn't mean to strengthen it, but just knowing that, say if we want to introduce a new program, that the policies and procedures are being followed, that there's that accountability. And what I mean by data is, so say if a new program is being introduced, seeing, for example, with the new Dibbles assessment, seeing if we're seeing some growth, and not that we would do something different, but if we reevaluate in 5 years, do we want to stick with the same program or try something different? I guess it's more of an accountability.
Yeah, and I agree with that. What I would like to get to And again, it's how do we build our data systems, right? So how do we talk about systems? So how do we report? Same thing with F&O. We give a monthly report on certain data. And so how do I present data that's a data dashboard on long-term data? What's our SAS scores? What's our AP scores? What's our access scores? So those are yearly assessments. So how are we looking over trends on our AP European history over the last 5 years, right? That's big kind of data. Sorry, Mr. Claffey. So what's that? But again, AP scores are bigger kind of data. And then we have mid-cycle data. What's our quarterly assessments? And then what's our short term? So same thing with the elementary report cards. So what are we collecting on a monthly basis? How are we doing? And I think that's some of the agenda that we go forward. How am I presenting a dashboard to this committee on our student achievement or the data that we want to look at? So I think I would like to move in that kind of fashion where the F&O committee gets a monthly report or a quarterly report on our expenses. We should be getting the same report on our student achievement and what's that data and how do we build that kind of program. And to the point of if we're looking at piloting or introducing something, here's our data that supports a change or the evaluation of our program. And then how do we present that data here as well? So I think, again, that's the accountability, the effectiveness, and the evaluation of it. But we have to build our data systems into that short-term cycle, that mid-cycle, and long-term, and how are they all triangulated?
President Bishop? We're having a conversation, so I was
Call me Jen
I'm taking notes.
today.
Ms. Bishop, Ms. Bishop.
So when I think of curriculum and evaluation, curriculum to me is what is provided to the student. Evaluation has a broader definition for me where it could be evaluation of the program being used, evaluation of teacher satisfaction, but also test scores for kids, or however else we want to grab data for how kids are feeling about the information that they're giving. So when we talk about evaluation, do we want to define it as evaluating the curriculum presented or evaluating, do you want it to focus all four of those aspects or just the children's data, the students' data?
So it's always about student achievement and the outcomes, right? And it's about that system. So again, I think going back to IL that was like, what does the evaluation tool look like? Whether it's CKLA is working, Eureka Math, or middle school social studies. So again, how are we evaluating the effectiveness? And it's always about the student outcomes. So are we looking at what was the professional development going into, the fidelity of the implementation of the curriculum, and then again, are we seeing the results of that? So that was going to be my question around IL, is how frequently we're looking at and how in-depth are we going into it.
So just to speak on state law about like the division of responsibilities. So it's Ed 303 for the school boards and Ed 302 for the superintendent. And so when it comes to curriculum, the school board establishes criteria, approves, and monitors, but the superintendent recommends and oversees the curriculum, right? So that's like that. Our job is not to go out and find the curriculum. Our job is to say, does this curriculum meet the needs of the district? And we can say yes or no, but we need the data, right? And I know our curriculum and evaluation policy as it stands says something about professional development too. But again, we just need to establish the criteria for how our personnel are supposed to, what they're supposed to be doing to meet their job. But it's the superintendent's job to interview, promote, and train the staff, not our job to do that.
No.
So we're not supposed to be bringing professional development.
No.
We're just supposed to be aware if there are gaps, how the superintendent is meeting
Watch
those
the horse get brought to water.
needs, right? Meeting those needs. So I think, yeah. But I don't know that we have been getting the data the last couple years. in order to be able to say, yes, this curriculum is, we're monitoring the, whether or not this curriculum is meeting the needs, whether or not we're monitoring.
Well, have we held on to a curriculum long enough to grab any data that's actually meaningful?
Foundations has been around forever here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think, again, to the point, I don't think there's been a formal evaluation of it. It's either we're looking at, there's we put a steering committee together, like we think about the changes, and that's usually during a steering committee is during a time of change.
Yeah.
And then it comes forward, but it's usually there's a new resource coming out or something like that, but there hasn't been, that formal evaluation of a structure per se.
Start talking about data points. I have so many, like, what are the correlations? But that's just me being a nerd. That has nothing to do with me being on the board.
I thought it was interesting that there's no state example. You know,
Yeah.
there's nothing for BDEC, and
Nashua policy that Nashua
Right.
created years and I don't know how
Yes.
many years ago.
I thought that was interesting, and to me, that's
Since 1995.
When it was the Community Relation and Transportation
Well-
Committee.
it was approved under your watch, wasn't it?
No,
2018.
That's the last time it was reviewed.
I was here 2020.
Well, it says approved in 2018.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look back, in 1995, it was board approved. It was created or changed probably from community relations to this one.
Sure.
In 2004, it was reviewed. In 2005, they suspended it. In 2006, they changed it from instruction committee to what it is now, right? And then in 2018, they looked at it and said, yep, we're going to keep it.
Yes.
So now it's been 6 years. It's made its way back up. It should be every 4 years. To do we keep it? If we got rid of the curriculum committee, we would also have to change our committee's policy because we've had a policy since, I'd have to pull it up again. Had a policy since,
So you want to get rid of
No.
curriculum committee?
I was gonna say since 2007.
No, I just thought it was interesting that we couldn't find
Right, but since 2007, we've had this other policy, committees and delegates, that says the board shall have these 5 standing committees, and curriculum is the first one. But it's not, it's not etched in stone.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I think that as we move toward being more broader, trying out new curriculums, enacting new curriculums, it's our job as the board, and I think that the New Hampshire School Board Association can say it the best. The board's action should be focused on mission statements, goal-based outcomes, local board policies, academic standards, which I believe that's what we're talking about today, and sufficient communication with the community is the last line on there. Like I said, I'm new. I'm always referring to what I can find online to give me some understanding. And to me, academic standards goes into how we evaluate and assess the curriculum, because otherwise, how do we know what academic standards are? And I mean, that's the last line on the New Hampshire School Boards Association. So I just wanted to put that out there. One of 9, I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, one other thing that this committee has done in the past is every year the course catalog is updated at the high school, and typically that comes here as well.
Yep.
Right, where the teachers will come and say, hey, no one has signed up for, I don't know, whatever class.
Unicorn studies.
Yeah, unicorn studies in the last 5 years, but we have a growing interest in, machining, so let's do that. Drop this one, add this one, which I think is also helpful.
And I think if Miss Oden were here, she would say that she liked the CNE, the the behavior reports and the attendance reports. would come
Yes.
into-
So maybe rather than making any serious changes to the policies, we could talk about, we have a meeting in just a few weeks, talk about what kind of reporting would you, or would we like to see just at our next meeting and maybe later on?
And that's what, again, I would look for some guidance, again, working collaboratively. Like, again, how do we want to structure these meetings? What data do you want to talk about? Where do we want to go deeper? I know the last couple of years, it's been an elementary focus. We're talking about bringing in, again, AP, CTE,
Yes.
middle school, again, that K-12 kind of focus. And how do we create those data dashboards? So it might be.
So what if we had a high school focus September, middle school October, elementary November?
Yep, and we can kind of, so if we have that
Just
rotation,
throwing that out.
yeah, we have that rotation, it's,
Just
three
for the next
reports
three.
per level, and then we always have a K-12 that I can give you a dashboard.
December.
Yep.
But you have I didn't get an answer to my question about is it the SAS,
So the SAS
NEAP, but
Yeah.
you have those, we have those. I couldn't access to the most recent ones, but they're out there, right?
They are out there. Usually, unfortunately, they come out so late in the school year to actually do anything. It's June by the time it comes out. And then, again, that should be a state of the state of like, how are we going from year to year? But, a letter goes home to parents, but it's, again, it's June and they may not appreciate it.
And is it Jonathan, Mr.
Foster.
Is this something he could do for us
Yep, absolutely.
without costing a fortune in overtime? As
No,
far as, because we've lost the person who was kind of in charge of these meetings. My guess is your plate isn't less full. Mr. Posca's is probably more full. And I just was thinking about, for example, in September, if we have some kind of high school presentation, is there somebody at that level that you could delegate this to? I'm not saying don't come, but I just mean,
No, I'll be here.
but is there somebody who could kind of
No, absolutely. I think,
speak to the,
yeah, Mr.
this-
Foster is available to, again, help us build those dashboards, but, Mr. Richard and Mr. Burns is available, or whether it's department chairs, but it just provides more focus, right? If we have clear expectations on what we're going to communicate and when, it actually makes it easier in our communication.
so at the high school level, what data would you guys like to see in September, if that's on the agenda?
So I don't know, the beginning of the year is difficult, right? So, I mean, I would imagine that at the high school level, there could be some discussion of SAS data year over year. Like, are we seeing any trends? Are we seeing any?
High school?
Yeah, they take SAS in high school. They also take the SATs.
They
Yeah,
take
I
the
was-
SATs.
You could do graduation rates.
I mean, a question that I just have in general, because the state mandated the civics education and like everyone has to pass the citizenship test to graduate, like a presentation on how Nashua is doing that, right? Is it working?
We did have a presentation on the two head teachers, social studies did present. Was
Yep.
it at the whole board, the full board or committee?
No, it was at committee last
Yeah.
fall, I
You
think,
mean you want to know how they're,
right?
I
What
think
else?
they're integrating it, but sure.
So,
Those kinds of things.
So, Mr. Claffey, if I can communicate with you, we'll be in touch with the high school principals on the data that they're already collecting, and then be able to present that. So that we can give you an overview, and then to the rest of the committee, if there's any data that's missing from the data that they're already collecting, if we can add that. So,
And then if there's any gaps, in the past, some things are coming back to me pre-COVID. In the past, the previous CTE director was like, we've been talking at the high school level and we feel like we're missing some kids in algebra. So what would be really cool is if you guys allowed us to apply for this grant so that we could combine robotics and algebra and create a program. And then that was asking the board, to approve she had to fill out some paper or whatever. And we created a whole program. But I don't know how that program is doing. I assume it's great. But, I think that this committee could be used for what the district needs as well.
And I think it will. I'm very optimistic that it will now.
Yeah.
Yes, if the question. was what would we like to see too, brought to the curriculum. How about how they've done, how it has stretched out? I'm looking for like over when they switch over from fifth grade to sixth grade, right? So there's that change in education. Is there new testing? How are they doing? How is any student in the district doing in the testing? Like, not, especially with the new curriculum. So we're stretching out all of the CKLS.
CKLA at the elementary school. Yeah.
So like that, we said that we wanted to be able to review that, to move on.
It's too soon to do that one.
Yeah.
I'm not saying in the future we can't, but I just think
Yeah, that,
first year, I'm
And
just
it's
thinking
only-
of the CKLA. I just think,
But how
we
about
got a meeting in 3 weeks. You're talking about gathering new data, which is great, but I'm looking to, just for the next couple of meetings, let's have some real productive, fruitful, informative sessions.
And then the only thing else I would request as a not member of this committee is that there be a synopsis, like JSSBC gives a synopsis at the full board, so that if someone misses it, and
There was
your
no synopsis for a few.
right, if your synopsis is like, hey, we went over all this great stuff, and I'm like, oh, I didn't take the time to watch it because last week was a busy week. Now I know to go back and get more details. Or I've gotten enough from your synopsis that I know that I don't want to watch an hour and a half of data.
If I felt there was, I won't go there.
Yeah, I'd love to just see baseline information about what's happening now so that when we review and evaluate, we can see the changes and the shifts. But also, this is pie in the sky, and I always do this, I get too big, but student satisfaction with the education that they're getting isn't always found within their grades. But I would love to get, I'm sure it's surveys and it's impossible to do, but are behavior issues going down as class rigor is going up? Like, if kids are more engaged in their middle school and high school curriculums, are we seeing less kids on cell phones? Are we seeing less fights in the hallway? Are we, by creating a world in which they're more challenged, are they then not asserting their autonomy in negative ways?
at some point, I would love to not make a policy, but review the procedures for how we adopt new programs as well.
Programs or curriculums?
Yeah, curricula, yeah.
Yeah. Your committee, Mr. Claffey, you can do
I don't-
whatever you.
So, are we agreed that the next meeting that this committee has, we will be provided information about the high schools, data about the high schools, and we'll have is it okay if Dr. Arndine and I have a conversation about that data? And if you guys send me an
Absolutely.
email and there's anything you think of in particular that you think we have now, I mean, we have the AP scores, SAT scores, we have graduation rates, I believe.
We have longitudinal data that the high
Ever-
schools both have.
come to the board or to the, just go to you?
No. Dr. Andre and I will have a conversation.
They'll organize the meeting and then it'll come here.
He will, and you're certainly welcome to come to the meeting.
No,
You can't come to the
No,
planning.
that'll be a quorum.
quorum.
So
Oh, as an alternate?
No, so, I'm sorry.
She can come to the meeting, but your planning.
Oh, no, I
period-
meant the
I
curriculum
made that
meeting.
mistake before and
You can certainly come to the curriculum meeting when this data is presented, and then I guess you would present highlights. You kind of present an overview of the highlights of that presentation at the full meeting. We are going to have a conversation about some of the data that Dr. Andre can get pertaining to high school achievement for the September meeting. That's all we've said.
and I'd like middle school too, because with the new McCarthy going in and
Could
all
that
of
be
the
at a different
shifts.
meeting?
that'll be
It'll be a different meeting,
That's
but I
what I
think
meant.
we need to, especially with all of the shifts within the middle school, I think we need to start tracking what's working and what isn't so that we can be on top of stuff.
And Ms. Daniels Williams, we have that subcommittee working with the NTU on evaluating the changes. So that could be reported out as well. But that's, again, going to be more November, like it won't be the first couple weeks of school.
But you can make a queue for agenda items. I mean, policy has a queue that's like 6 years long,
You're
right?
welcome.
And Mr. Posca and I, every month when we meet to set the agenda, we're like, okay, here's all the things that we need to do. Which ones are rising to
I
the
was going to
top?
say I could meet with Mr. Posca too.
Like, we just keep a running list.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But he and I met last week because Dr. Andre was out of town and we just had a chat about it. And I think you just send an email and say, hey, I'd like to see this. Talk to Dr. Andre. But
Right. I mean, what happens, at least with policy, when someone sends me an email, I share it with Mr. Posca, I write it down in my notebook, and then it goes on my little queue, like my list. And then we talk about, does this fit in July or do we need to wait till August?
Right.
see, that conversation hasn't been happening. And that's why I think things are going to change.
Yeah.
And I will certainly look to your experience and queuing expertise as we move forward.
So
But we can
whenever-
expect a meeting with you or Mr. Posca and discuss the agenda. And then if you guys, like I said, if you want to have concerns, I just think if we focus for the first couple, kind of narrow it down.
Yeah, just
Instead of
baseline
just saying,
stuff.
what about this? What about this?
Yeah.
Just think about. Dr. Andre, anything else?
That's it.
And when we review policies, if we don't change them, but we still approve them, we don't have to make any changes to them. We can just say reviewed and the date. They just need to be reviewed every 4 years. So just FYI.
Okay, and we could certainly do that. I know Ms. Gilio was really hoping to be at this meeting based on what happened
Yeah.
in the more recent past, but if there's no further items,
You are hitting the 90 minutes.
I
Look at
would be
you.
looking for a motion. Well, I'm sure for Dr. Andre, what is it like? Is it like 6 a.m. now for you?
It's 7 in the morning, no, 3 in the morning.
3 in the morning, yes.
Yeah,
But you look fresh and reinvigorated.
thanks.
It's like this committee. All right, I'll be looking for a motion.
So moved.
No. I move that we adjourn.
Now you can second, Kristen.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're not voting members of the committee.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.